Hi there and welcome. If you're watching this video, it means that you are being onboarded to the Talk915 client for the Really Great Teacher Company. So before we get started, let's go through our onboarding checklist. So at the beginning, you would need to watch just a few brief videos on the client and on some of our teachers who have done some introduction videos. That is just to give you a broader idea of what you can do with your introduction videos, etc. Right here is our link, and right below it is the password. Next, we would need to set up your profile. Your profile is really important for us to move you on into the next step of your onboarding. So we would need your introduction videos, pictures, recordings, and all other documents to be uploaded onto the Talk915 portal for your account to be created. But first, it would need to be pre-approved by either myself or by Nicole. Next, we will then need to schedule a training session which will take you through the client's platform, Microsoft Teams, and a nice scheduling session just to ensure that you are up to speed on how to work with your schedule. We will also then ensure that you have a Skype account set up, as this is how you will contact the Talk915 customer service team in case you have any emergencies or any issues during your lessons. Once the above steps are completed, you will then need to add your schedule to the shared schedule so that other team leaders know when you are ready to teach, or RTT. Once you have been teaching for quite a while, we will then have a catch-up session with you just to ensure that there are no pitfalls for when you are teaching. Next, we see a nice table of contents. We will not go through these. You can go through these during your own time. But let's talk a little bit about Talk915 and the Really Great Teacher Company. So Talk915 is an online tutorial company in Shenzhen. They are dedicated to teaching English to students in China and Taiwan. The company has over 300,000 students all over China and Taiwan, and their mission is to build an online cross-cultural communication platform that will advance the language skills of people through technology and education. The Really Great Teacher Company, however, is the middleman between great teachers and great companies. So we are a specialist provider of high quality teacher management services to the online English education market. This right here is myself. I am John Groenewald. I'm responsible for any queries regarding scheduling, bookings, and performance management. Next, we then have a beautiful page of some of our key contacts. So all of our communication is either channeled through Teams or via email. Right here, you can see my contact details and what you can contact me for. Next, we then see Nicole Whiting. She's our online service manager. She's in charge of payroll and contracts. Right below Nicole is a very important contact. This is Talk915's customer service. So they are there for any student related issues, platform issues, or emergency cancellations. Please be sure to add them on Skype before our next session. Right below Talk915 is Chris Miller. He is our training and development lead. So you will then be put through some training and personal development by Chris through our Evolve initiatives. Right below Chris is Fiona Lim. She is in charge of recruitment. So for any recruitment related queries or referrals, you are more than welcome to contact Fiona. Next, these are just some types of students that you may come across with our client. So our students age range are from 3 years old up until adults. Their level of English is from beginner all the way up until advanced. Some types of students that you may come across in terms of personality, we categorize them in two different categories. We have our enthusiastic students. These are students with a high energy drive and who want to interact throughout the lesson. We then need to get to know the student, make them read and make sentences, and have some nice free talk with them. Right below our enthusiastic students, we also have disinterested students. These are students who struggle to focus for long periods of time and may not want to speak or listen. Get this type of student interested in the lesson by making use of props, interactive games, and utilizing the lesson material in a way that will gauge the student's interests. Next, let's talk about what makes a great lesson. This client loves for us to be sufficiently prepared for the lesson. This means downloading any other extra or additional material or creating an outline for our lessons. We can also make use of props, pictures, TPR, reward systems, especially for our younger students. The platform has a very beautiful reward system in place, but if you wish, you can then also have your own stars or your own trophies on your side and then just show them a beautiful picture of those or put them up on your board if you feel like rewarding your students for a great job. We also need to demonstrate instructions clearly. Sufficient use of annotation tools during the lesson is really important. Be sure to underline, draw circles, draw squares, and also note down any mistakes that the student has made for some hot or cold error corrections. Sufficient praise is really important, and also interact and get to know your student. Do some reading, make some sentences with the student, and then also have some free talk. Good time management is also really critical for this client. So let's move on into our next page and then see how we can outline our lessons. So this is a general class outline that we have. We need to ensure that our students have a wonderful warm-up. Right after our warm-up, all lessons are not the same, so what we can do is just make sure that we target each of these points by doing different activities. And lastly, always make sure that you highlight the student's performance and give advice and further clarity with a nice conclusion. Let's move on into our next page. These are the minimum requirements for our client. We always need to be available for 40 peak hours per month in the peak teaching hours of 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Beijing time each day. Within the first 2 months of teaching, we need to reach a booking rate of 80% or more, and we also need to have a regular schedule that we do not change often. So if you decide to teach from Tuesdays to Sundays, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. South African time, which translates into 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Beijing time, please keep that consistent for as long as possible to increase your chances of getting regular bookings. Check in 30 minutes before your first open slot of each day. Open your schedule 3 weeks in advance and keep it updated. And this is a requirement from our clients, so please be sure to follow those rules. An uninterrupted power supply is really important for all of our South African teachers, especially during times of load shedding, but also to prevent any issues during unwanted power interruptions. Conducting lessons in an improved teaching environment with a wired network connection is really important. This is to ensure that if any issues do play out, that we have proof to provide that we had a stable network connection. Let's move to our next page. Here are some details regarding our uninterrupted power supply. So please check your load shedding schedule daily. Keep your laptop, internet, and lights always connected to your UPS or inverter. Please ensure that your power supply can provide you with enough power for your lessons for at least 3 hours per day. Also note that the inability to teach due to a power outage will not be considered a valid excuse, and any penalties that come from those will surely apply. Let's move on over to our next page, and this is just a quick excerpt on how to increase your bookings. Avoid changing your schedule often. Open your schedule 4 weeks in advance. Open a regular schedule. Open during peak hours, which is 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. South African time, or 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Beijing time. Open sessions on the weekends, as it is the most popular time for your students, so ensure to have at least one weekend day each week. Encourage feedback from your students, especially if you had a good lesson. Build relationships with your students to encourage regular bookings. Be genuine and provide good feedback and corrections to your students. Ensure that your lighting is good and close a slot if it is not booked within the first 30 minutes of the proposed time. Let's move on into our next page. Here's an outline of some class rules and policies. Enter class within the first 5 to 10 minutes prior to your session. This is really important to ensure that you have no issues with entering class. If you do have any issues, please contact customer service immediately and let them know. Right after you have done that, contact your team on Microsoft Teams so that we are able to assist you from our side as well. Sessions are 25 minutes each. Lessons are conducted through video, so always keep your camera on as all lessons are recorded. If a teacher is late 10 minutes or more, the teacher will be considered absent without notice. Also, if no check-in is done before the first class of the day, it will be cancelled and cancellation penalties will apply. If it's an ongoing issue, then a warning will unfortunately need to be issued. If a teacher is late for 1 to 2 minutes for multiple classes in a month and it all adds up to 10 minutes or more, the teacher will also be considered as absent without notice. Always extend time if you are late. Avoid cancelling class less than 2 hours in advance unless it's in the case of an emergency and proof can be provided of said emergency. Let's move to our next page. Here is an outline of some class times. You may log in early but start class on time and end class on time. If you are 1 to 2 minutes late for a class, please extend so the class can be a full 25 minutes. Leave feedback for all classes. Failure to do so will result in an absent without comment penalty. Next, here is also some troubleshooting of what we can do before class. Make sure that your Chrome is updated. Flash player, microphone and camera is set to allow. Test your sound and camera settings before class and during class under the settings option in the BJSL, eClass or CC Talk platforms. As you can see, our client uses 3 different class platforms. Ensure that you have added customer service on Skype. For student related or IT issues, contact customer service for assistance. Next, we have some information on our feedback structure and timeline. Feedback can be written during those 5 minutes between each lesson and latest before 12 a.m. Beijing time or 6 p.m. South African time before the next day in China. If a student is absent, you will automatically be kicked out of the classroom after 15 minutes and the portal will automatically complete the feedback for said student. For any special lessons, you will need to stay in class for its full duration. If a student is absent after 25 minutes, mark them as absent in the student feedback section. If a teacher fails to provide any feedback before 12 a.m. Beijing time or 6 p.m. South African time, a penalty will apply that varies depending on the type of lesson. Provide useful, clear and sufficient feedback to your student. Avoid negative feedback at all costs. Here is a nice example of what we can do with our student feedback. Let's move to our next page. Now let's talk about our penalties. As you can see, we have different types of penalties. We have penalties for complaints, whether it be serious or general. We also have complaints for absenteeism, whether it be absent with notice, absent without notice, absent without notice, or absent without comment. We also have penalties for the number of cancelled classes per month. So let's go through them. But before we do, let's talk about some definitions. Your class-based rate is based on 30-minute sessions, but your base pay is still calculated by the hour. Restriction is if your profile is blocked from receiving new students on your schedule pending improvement in performance. Absent without comment means the teacher failed to submit feedback before the deadline. Absent without notice means that the teacher failed to cancel class or notify customer service of his or her absence. If a teacher is late 1 to 2 minutes and it adds up to 10 minutes Or if the teacher is late by 10 minutes or more for one class, that is also considered as an absent without notice lesson. Absent with notice means that the class is cancelled by a teacher or customer service team or team leader who was notified in advance. Alright, so let's talk about complaints penalties. So we have two different types of complaints. We have serious complaints and general complaints. Under serious complaints, we have either a complaint related to your teaching method or your attitude. For those, there are one type of penalty that comes with it. If we have reviewed the lesson and it is found as justified, then the teacher will unfortunately receive a 15 times base pay penalty. For a general complaint, either related to your teaching environment, your appearance, or your equipment, you will then receive a warning, and then the class will also be cancelled, refunded to the student. The second thing that could happen is if you receive two or more complaints for the same issue within 1 month, then it will automatically be upgraded to a serious complaint that also comes with a 15 times base pay penalty. Let's move to our next page. Let's talk about absenteeism. So for absenteeism, we have an absent without notice penalty. So if you are absent without notice once in a month, there will be a deduction of 15 times your base pay. If it happens twice in a month, there is a deduction of 30 times your base pay. And if it happens more than twice in a month, the contract of the teacher will unfortunately be terminated. We take each and every absenteeism on a case by case basis. So if you have any proof to provide as to why you were absent for the lesson, please do provide it to us so we can be in negotiations with the client. Under the actions taken, if you have missed class once within the month, your profile will be restricted from getting new students for 2 weeks to 1 month, and the existing bookings on your profile will remain until that time is complete. If you have had a good attendance record and it improves during the observation period, the restriction will be lifted and you will again be visible for bookings. If there is no improvement in your attendance during this period, the contract will unfortunately be terminated. Next, so two different situations can occur if you have had two missed lessons within 1 month. So number one, if you had a good disciplinary record and good performance, you will be restricted from receiving new students for at least 1 month. During the observation period, if you have no absences with or without notice, the restriction will be lifted and you will again be visible for bookings. If no improvement in your attendance is made during this period, your contract will unfortunately be terminated. If you have had a poor disciplinary record and or poor performance in the past, your contract will automatically be terminated if you have had two absences within 1 month and you have no proof to provide for both of them. Alright, let's move to our next page. Let's talk about absent with notice penalties. So if you are absent with notice, that means you have cancelled your class yourself, or you have contacted myself or any other team leader, or you contact customer service so that they can cancel your lesson for you. As you can see, we have three different classifications. The first one is A, that is if you cancel class with more than 2 hours notice and less than 5 days notice, there is a deduction in 35% of your base pay penalty. For B is if you cancel class with less than 2 hours notice, there's a deduction in your full pay. So if you miss one lesson or if you cancel one lesson, they deduct the pay for that lesson. C is if you cancel class more than 5 days in advance, then there is no deduction in pay and no penalties will apply. No warnings either. So let's say you canceled 5 classes under 2 hours notice, you will be penalized a full pay rate for each lesson that you have cancelled. Okay, if you have cancelled 5 classes in more than 2 hours and less than 5 days notice, there will be a 35% deduction in your pay rate for each lesson that you have cancelled within said time. Right below our classifications, we can then also see the frequency and the action that comes with it. Alright, so if it happens less than 10, more than 10, and within 15, more than 5, and 5, and more than 5. Okay, so you will either receive a reminder, a warning letter, and or your profile will be restricted from receiving new students for 2 weeks to 1 month. All of the existing bookings will still remain on your schedule until your performance improves. The client has also reached out to us and informed us with a new set of rules. So if the teacher falls within the highest 10% of cancellations under 2 hours notice, without valid reason and documentation, a warning will be issued automatically that is valid for 3 months. The teacher's profile will then be hidden from receiving new bookings until improvement is shown. Please note that any cancellations need to be provided with proof. So if you do have proof, no warnings will come into play, but the penalties will still stand as students need to be refunded. If you have no proof to provide, then warning letters and termination could be on the books, unfortunately. Let's move on to our next page. So let's talk about leave requests. Approval from your team leader is required if you will be unable to teach for 1 week or more, and this needs to be submitted 30 days in advance. You need to use the link below to submit your leave request to the Really Great Teacher Company. Once it is approved by your team leader, you will then submit your request on the teacher portal to Talk915, and this needs to be submitted no less than 15 days in advance. Please ensure that no sessions are booked during your leave period or that you have no open slots during your leave period. If leave is taken during a period where classes are confirmed or pre-booked, it will be considered a cancelled class. So please see the cancelled class penalties on the previous page. Let's move on to our next page. Here is just a list of some cardinal rules for us to follow and some daily tasks and things for us to be reminded of. Number 1, never cancel class without informing your team leader first on Teams or within the Teams groups, depending on the timeline that it needs to be done in. Leave feedback for all your students before 12 a.m. Beijing time or 6 p.m. South African time. Next, open majority of your sessions during peak hours. This is unfortunately not negotiable. Our peak times are from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. South African time or 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Beijing time. If you are experiencing a problem with any of the platforms, inform customer service first and then your team leader on Teams or within the Teams group. Do not privately message anyone, so your emergency cannot be missed. Okay? Ensure you have Skype and Teams downloaded on your phone and laptop in case of emergencies. Check your schedule often. Sessions can be booked up to 1 hour before the start time. So if a session is not booked within 30 minutes of the start time, close the open slot to avoid any absent without notice lessons or to avoid any late bookings that you are unaware of. Let's move to our next page. Always prepare the lesson material beforehand and check the material loaded for any recent changes by the student or parent. If you are experiencing issues with any of the platforms, don't log out of the session, simply refresh or change lines depending on the platform that you are on, but avoid doing this too much as you will be flagged for abnormal activity. Please ensure your teaching environment is appropriate for class. Teaching background. Please ensure your teaching environment is appropriate for class. This means that you need to have a teaching background with an educational poster, noise cancelling headset, and HD camera. If any of these are unapproved, a warning will be issued and future classes will be cancelled until improved. Check in on teams in the Talk915 check-ins group before your first slot of the day, whether it is booked or unbooked, with ready to teach, or as we say, RTT. And this needs to be 30 minutes prior to the start of your day. RTT means that you have checked all of your equipment, you have checked your power supply, and you have checked your network. Let's move to our next page. Provide evidence and screenshots or pictures to Talk915 customer service and the Really Great Teacher Company of issues you are experiencing that may prevent you from teaching your lesson. Please do not communicate with the student outside of the classroom to arrange a suitable time to teach them. You will be flagged by the client. Avoid discussing topics that aren't related to the lesson unless it's during the first 1 to 2 minutes of class and you are building some rapport with these students. Please do not show videos or read excessively. The student is there for a live teacher. Next, please ensure your camera is on from the start to the end of the lesson, even if your student is not there. Lessons are recorded, and this is in case you had any technical issues or if you've had any issues with a student. If you are going to be teaching in a new environment, it will need to be pre-approved before you start teaching. You may receive new lesson material from your student via Skype as a private message. You will then need to download it and then upload it to the platform to teach the material. Please note that you always need to keep customer service and your team leaders informed of any IT emergency and or personal matters at all times that may or may not prevent you from teaching your lessons. Thank you so much for joining me. Here is also a note for some teaching reference materials. This is just to help you out with teaching younger students. Thank you so much.